Welcome to where we bring history to life through storytelling. Today, we're diving into the dramatic tale of Broadway battles, the chaotic rivalry that sparked the Astor Place Riot. Get ready for a story of ambition, jealousy, and the unexpected riot that turned New York City into a battlefield. Let's get started. On November 22nd, 1847, New York City saw the grand opening of the Astor Place Opera House, a majestic theatre financed by America's first millionaire, John Jacob Astor. The theatre was nothing short of extravagant. Massive columns at the entrance, seating for nearly 2,000, and located in one of Manhattan's most affluent neighborhoods. Astor Place quickly became the symbol of New York's elite, representing the future of theatre in America. To be seen there meant you had wealth, status, and the privilege of being part of the city's high society. In 1848, a legendary actor named William came back to America for what he called his farewell tour. He was retiring after one last round of performances, with Macbeth being his showstopper. His first night in New York at the Astor Place Opera House was a resounding success, so much so that he decided to make a speech to the audience afterward. He thanked them for their support, but, in what seemed like a polite gesture, took a not-so-subtle jab at his rival, Edwin. Everyone knew who he was talking about, even though William didn't name him directly. Unbeknownst to William, a friend of Edwin's, named James Oakes, was sitting in the audience. James was quick to run to Edwin and spread the word, stirring the pot. James even wrote a scathing letter to the Boston Mail, exposing all the drama behind William's actions, including the role he played in getting Edwin blacklisted in Europe. The rivalry between the two actors was heating up. Not one to back down, Edwin decided to take his own shot. He staged his own production of Macbeth, just a few blocks away from where William was performing, at the same time. It was like a theatre version of an all-out street brawl, with both men fighting for the audience's loyalty. This was the final straw for William, who wrote in his diary, "I cannot stomach the United States as a nation. Give me a dungeon, or hell, anything but this." His frustrations were reaching their boiling point. Then, things escalated even further. During one of William's performances, a fan of Edwin's threw a dead sheep on stage. Yes, a dead sheep. Not just any random object, but a full-on, blood-soaked sheep landing right in front of William. How it got in, no one knew, but it was clear that the stakes had been raised. By May 7th, 1849, William took the stage at the Astor Place Opera House again, but this time, the atmosphere was tense. The rivalry had reached a fever pitch, and the theatre was filled with anticipation. Inside, Edwin's supporters, having somehow gotten tickets, began to throw things at William: pennies, potatoes, rotten eggs, even apples. The crowd outside was in full swing too, as chaos reigned inside and outside the theatre. The situation turned into a full-blown riot. By the end of the night, people were ripping chairs from the floor and using them as weapons, while others threw things at the stage. William, trying to continue with the performance, eventually had to give up and leave the stage for his own safety. But this wasn't the end. 3 nights later, the two actors faced off again, each performing their rival Macbeths just a few blocks apart. The situation had grown beyond their rivalry, though. Signs around the city encouraged people to pick a side. William's fans were seen as loyal to England, while those who supported Edwin were considered true Americans. Tensions between the working-class Americans and the wealthy elites had reached a boiling point. On May 10th, 1849, as both actors prepared for their shows, the crowd outside the theatre grew larger. Reports estimate that up to 20,000 people had gathered. Some came for the performance, but many were there simply for the drama, as the theatre feud had become a matter of national pride. Inside, Edwin's supporters were causing a scene once again, and the police quickly moved to arrest some of the most disruptive troublemakers. But outside, the situation had worsened. The crowd started chanting, handing out pamphlets claiming that William and his supporters were trying to make America British again. As the protests grew, the crowd turned violent, throwing bricks at the theatre and trying to storm inside. The police, outnumbered by thousands, could do little to stop it. Inside, William, fearing for his safety, decided to leave. He hid in his hotel room for the rest of the night, fearful of being attacked by the mob. Meanwhile, the situation outside continued to spiral out of control. A fire started in the basement of the Astor Place Opera House, possibly set by some of the arrested rioters. Smoke began pouring out of the building, and panic spread among the theatregoers inside. By 9:15 p.m., the violence reached its peak. The government called in the National Guard, but even their efforts couldn't calm the rioting crowd. The soldiers fired into the air, but that only made things worse. Soon, they began shooting directly at the mob, and one by one, people began to fall. It was complete chaos. Blood was spilled, and people dropped dead in the streets. The Astor Place Opera House was partially destroyed by the fire and the violence, and when the dust settled, the city had been forever marked by this deadly riot. In an almost surreal twist, Edwin, completely unaffected by the madness just a few blocks away, performed his Macbeth almost without interruption. While William's world had crumbled, Edwin continued his performance, oblivious to the destruction surrounding him. The next day, as New York still reeled from the violence, the New York Tribune summed up the events perfectly. Our city has been intensely agitated. A riot of the most outrageous and disgraceful character has taken place. For the last 36 hours, New York has worn the aspect of a civil war, all because two actors quarreled. The aftermath was devastating. William, shaken by the events, packed his bags and left for London, never to return to America. His career in the States was over. The riot that started over a simple theatre rivalry had turned into a national crisis, and New York would never be the same.